The blood-streaked handprint on the wall of the shabby cabin told a story more haunting than words could express. Eleanor Nelson slumped against the rough wooden floor, her bruised face illuminated by the flickering lantern light as dusk settled over Montana Territory in 1876. The life she once knew had shattered like the china plates her husband James had hurled at her before storming out into the night. Eleanor's trembling fingers reached for her abdomen, now empty where life had been growing just days before. The miscarriage had come without warning during the harsh winter months, leaving her alone with grief that hollowed her from within. But tonight, that grief had transformed into something more terrifying: her husband's uncontrollable rage when he learned their child was gone. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made Eleanor flinch, fear coursing through her battered body. But instead of her husband's heavy footfall, a different shadow fell across the threshold. "Madam," the voice was gentle, unfamiliar. "Your door's wide open. Everything all right in there?" Eleanor tried to speak, but only a whimper escaped her bloodied lips. She attempted to rise, to show some semblance of dignity before this stranger, but her legs betrayed her. The man entered cautiously, removing his hat. He wore simple trail clothes, dusty denim, a worn cotton shirt, and a leather vest. The silver star pinned to his chest caught the lamplight. "Sweet Jesus," he whispered, quickly kneeling beside her. "Who did this to you?" "My husband," Eleanor managed, her voice barely audible. He came home drunk. I told him about the baby, our baby." Fresh tears streamed down her face, stinging the open cuts. The stranger's face darkened as understanding dawned. "You lost a child," Eleanor nodded, unable to meet his eyes. The shame felt overwhelming: failure as a wife, failure as a mother. "And he beat you for it." The man's voice held controlled anger now. "Said I didn't take proper care," she whispered. "Said I killed our baby." Without hesitation, the man gently gathered her into his arms, his touch careful around her injuries. "It wasn't your fault," he said firmly, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You hear me? Whatever happened, it wasn't your fault." Those simple words, spoken by a complete stranger, broke something loose inside Eleanor, a dam of grief and guilt she'd been holding back. She collapsed against his chest, sobs racking her body as the stranger held her steady. "Name's Nathan Thornton," he said quietly after her tears had subsided. "I'm the new deputy in Coloma. Was making rounds when I heard shouting earlier." Eleanor didn't know then that this moment, broken and vulnerable in the arms of Deputy Nathan Thornton, would be the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives forever. She only knew that for the first time since losing her baby, someone had offered comfort instead of blame. "I'm Eleanor," she managed. "Eleanor Nelson." Nathan nodded, his expression solemn. "Mrs. Nelson, I need to get you to a doctor. Think you can stand?" Eleanor attempted to rise but immediately faltered. Without hesitation, Nathan scooped her into his arms with surprising gentleness for a man his size. As he carried her toward his horse, Eleanor caught sight of her reflection in a broken shard of mirror, bloodied, swollen, almost unrecognizable. The 23 years of her life had never felt heavier. "What about my husband?" she asked, sudden fear gripping her. "When he comes back?" "Let me worry about that," Nathan replied, his jaw set in determination. "Right now, you're my only concern." The night air was crisp and cool against Eleanor's burning skin as Nathan lifted her onto his horse. The town of Coloma lay just a mile to the east, its scattered lights promising safety. As Nathan mounted behind her, supporting her weight with strong arms, Eleanor closed her eyes. She didn't know if she'd ever return to the cabin she had called home for 3 years. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for this moment, cradled against the chest of a man who had shown her more kindness in 10 minutes than her husband had in months, Eleanor allowed herself to breathe. The doctor's house sat on the eastern edge of Coloma, a modest two-story structure with a small sign advertising Dr. Howard Williams, physician and surgeon. Despite the late hour, light glowed behind the curtains of the ground floor. Nathan dismounted first, then carefully lifted Eleanor from the horse. The movement sent fresh waves of pain through her body, but she bit back her cries. "Doc Williams is a good man," Nathan assured her as he carried her up the steps. "Served as an army surgeon during the war. He'll take good care of you." The door opened before Nathan could knock, revealing an older man with spectacles and thinning gray hair. His expression shifted from irritation to concern when he saw Eleanor's condition. "Deputy Thornton," he acknowledged, stepping aside. "Bring her in." Eleanor was placed gently on an examination table in a small, well-lit room that smelled of carbolic acid and herbs. Dr. Williams moved with practiced efficiency, examining her injuries while Nathan explained the situation in low tones. "Mrs. Nelson, I'm going to tend to your injuries now," the doctor said kindly. "Deputy Thornton will wait outside." Nathan hesitated, looking at Eleanor with concern. "Will you be all right?" She managed a small nod, though the prospect of being alone terrified her. "I'll be right outside that door," he promised, his voice firm with conviction. "Nobody's getting past me tonight." After he left, Dr. Williams worked methodically, cleaning cuts, applying salves, and binding her cracked ribs. "The bruising will fade," he told her gently. "But I'm more concerned about internal injuries, and—" He paused, his voice softening. "Deputy Thornton mentioned you recently suffered a miscarriage." Eleanor's eyes welled with fresh tears. "3 days ago." The doctor nodded solemnly. "I'm very sorry for your loss." "Have you been bleeding heavily since then?" "Some," she admitted. "It's mostly stopped now." "Good," he said, relief evident in his tone. "That's good. You need rest, plenty of fluids, and time to heal both your body and your heart." When the examination was complete, Dr. Williams opened the door to admit Nathan, who had been pacing the hallway. "She needs rest," the doctor told him. "But nothing's broken beyond those ribs. She's a strong woman." Nathan nodded, his eyes finding Eleanor's. "Doc, can she stay somewhere safe tonight? I need to find her husband." "My wife can make up the guest room," Dr. Williams offered. "She can stay as long as needed." Eleanor wanted to protest, to insist she needed to return home despite everything, but exhaustion and fear overwhelmed her. The thought of facing James again made her tremble. "Thank you," she whispered instead. Nathan approached her bedside, kneeling so they were at eye level. "Mrs. Nelson, I give you my word he won't hurt you again, but I need to know. Do you want to press charges against your husband?" The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. In all her pain and fear, Eleanor hadn't considered what would happen next. The law rarely intervened in matters between husband and wife. "Would it matter if I did?" she asked quietly. "It matters to me," Nathan replied, his gaze steady. "What he did was wrong, but I need your permission to act." Eleanor closed her eyes, weighing her limited options. James had friends in town. Her parents were dead. She had nowhere to go, no money of her own. "I need time," she finally said. "Time to think." Nathan nodded. "You have it. For now, rest. I'll post someone outside tonight just to be safe." As he turned to leave, Eleanor caught his hand. "Deputy Thornton, thank you for saying what you did, about it not being my fault." Something flashed across his face, understanding perhaps, or shared pain. "I meant every word, Mrs. Nelson." After Nathan left, Mrs. Williams, a kind woman with gentle hands, helped Eleanor to the guest room and assisted her into a clean nightgown. The bed was softer than anything Eleanor had slept on in years, and despite her pain, exhaustion pulled her toward sleep. Her last conscious thought was of Nathan Thornton's clear blue eyes and the certainty in his voice when he'd held her. "It wasn't your fault." For the first time since losing her baby, Eleanor slept without dreams. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, Eleanor forgot where she was, reaching instinctively for the warmth of her husband before memory crashed back the miscarriage, James's rage, the deputy's kindness. Every movement sent pain radiating through her body as she slowly sat up. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Williams entering with a tray. "Good morning, dear," the older woman said. "I've brought you some breakfast. How are you feeling?" "Sore," Eleanor admitted, "but better. Thank you for your hospitality." Mrs. Williams Martha, as she insisted Eleanor call her, smiled warmly. "It's no trouble at all. We're happy to help." While Eleanor ate, Martha explained that Nathan had returned late in the night. "He couldn't find your husband anywhere. Checked the saloons, the boarding house, even sent word to neighboring farms. James Nelson seems to have disappeared." Eleanor wasn't sure if this news brought relief or fresh anxiety. "He'll come back," she said quietly. "He always does." "Well, you're safe here until you decide what you want to do," Martha assured her. Deputy Thornton was quite insistent about that. Later that morning, Dr. Williams changed Eleanor's bandages and pronounced her on the mend, but in need of rest. Eleanor had just settled in a chair by the window, watching the busy main street of Coloma, when Nathan Thornton appeared at the door. He'd cleaned up since the previous night, his dark hair neatly combed, his clothes fresh. The silver star on his vest caught the sunlight as he removed his hat. "Mrs. Nelson," he said, nodding respectfully. "May I come in?" Eleanor gestured to a chair near hers. "Please." Nathan sat, his tall frame making the wooden chair seem small. Up close, Eleanor could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 28 or 30, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of outdoor life. "Still no sign of your husband," he said without preamble. "Sheriff Parker's keeping an eye out. We've got men watching the trails in and out of town." "You didn't have to do all that," Eleanor said, embarrassed by the attention. "Yes, madam, I did." Nathan's tone brooked no argument. "What happened to you wasn't just a private quarrel, it was assault." Eleanor looked down at her bandaged hands. "He wasn't always like this," she said softly, feeling a strange need to explain. "When we married 5 years ago, James was kind, ambitious. He had plans to buy land, start a proper ranch." "What changed?" Nathan asked gently. Eleanor sighed. "Life. The harsh winters, failed crops, and when I couldn't give him children." Her voice faltered. "This wasn't my first miscarriage, it was the third." Understanding dawned on Nathan's face, and he blamed you each time. "The drinking got worse after the second one," Eleanor admitted. The anger followed. "I kept thinking if I could just be a better wife, more careful." "Mrs. Nelson," Nathan interrupted firmly, "no woman deserves to be treated that way, no matter what." His conviction was so absolute that Eleanor found herself wanting to believe him, even as years of her husband's accusations echoed in her mind. "What will happen now?" she asked, changing the subject. Nathan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That depends on you. If you want to press charges, I'll support that decision. If not—" He hesitated. "Do you have family you can go to?" Eleanor shook her head. "My parents died of fever when I was 18. I've got a cousin in California, but we haven't spoken in years." "What about friends here in town?" Eleanor gave a sad smile. "James didn't like me socializing much, said a woman's place was in her home." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Mrs. Nelson, I hope you don't mind my asking, but how old are you?" 23, she replied. Something like sadness flashed across Nathan's face. "You're too young to have suffered so much," he said quietly. The simple compassion in his words brought unexpected tears to Eleanor's eyes. She turned toward the window, blinking them away. "I should let you rest," Nathan said, rising. "Mrs. Williams has offered to take you to the general store tomorrow for some new clothes. I've arranged credit for whatever you need." "I can't accept that," Eleanor protested. "Consider it an advance from the sheriff's office," Nathan replied. "We help victims of crimes all the time." Before Eleanor could argue further, Martha Williams appeared in the doorway. "Deputy, Sheriff Parker is looking for you. Says there's a situation at the Silver Dollar." Nathan nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Williams." He turned back to Eleanor. "I'll check on you tomorrow if that's all right." After he left, Martha sat in the chair he'd vacated. "That young man's taken quite an interest in your welfare," she observed. "He's just doing his job," Eleanor replied, uncomfortable with the implication. Martha gave her a knowing look. "Nathan Thornton goes above and beyond for everyone, it's true, but I've never seen him extend credit at Harrison's store before." Eleanor didn't know how to respond to that, so she changed the subject. "How long have you lived in Coloma, Martha?" The older woman smiled. "Almost 30 years now. Howard and I came out from Pennsylvania right after we married. Coloma was barely more than a mining camp, then rough men and rougher living, but it's grown into something decent." As Martha shared stories of the town's evolution, Eleanor found herself wondering what it might be like to truly belong somewhere. Her marriage to James had been marked by constant moving, following dreams of better land, better opportunities that never materialized. Coloma had been their fourth home in 5 years. For the first time, Eleanor allowed herself to imagine a life without James, a life where she might put down roots of her own choosing. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. That night, after Martha had helped her prepare for bed, Eleanor stood at the window watching the few lights of Coloma twinkle in the darkness. The pain in her body had dulled to a persistent ache, but her mind was clearer than it had been in months. Whatever happened next, she realized, would be her choice. The thought was as frightening as it was liberating. 3 days passed before James Nelson returned to Coloma. Eleanor had just finished helping Martha with the breakfast dishes when Sheriff Parker arrived at the Williams home, his expression grave. "Mrs. Nelson," he said, hat in hand. "Your husband's at my office. Says he wants to speak with you." Eleanor's hands began to tremble so violently that Martha quickly took the plate she was drying before it could fall. "He's been locked up since he got in this morning," the sheriff continued. "Found him trying to sell your wagon and team over in Deer Lodge. Deputy Thornton's with him now." "What does he want?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Says he's sorry, wants to make amends." Sheriff Parker looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Nelson, I should be straight with you. Without formal charges, I can't hold him much longer." Eleanor nodded, understanding the unspoken message. In the eyes of the law, a husband had certain rights over his wife and property rights that even a sympathetic sheriff couldn't easily override. "I'll come speak with him," she decided, straightening her shoulders despite the pain that lingered in her ribs. Martha protested, but Eleanor was resolute. "I need to face him sometime," she said. "Better with the sheriff and Deputy Thornton present." The sheriff's office was a simple wooden building on Coloma's Main Street, with 2 holding cells in the back. Eleanor walked slowly, each step requiring concentration as her body still protested sudden movements. Nathan met them at the door, his expression darkening when he saw Eleanor. "You didn't have to come," he said quietly. "Yes, I did," she replied with more confidence than she felt. James Nelson sat on a bench in one of the cells, his normally imposing frame somehow diminished by his surroundings. When he saw Eleanor, he stood quickly. "Ellie," he said, using the nickname she'd once loved. "Thank God you're all right. I've been worried sick." Eleanor stared at her husband of 5 years, seeing him with new clarity. His handsome features were haggard, his clothes disheveled, but his eyes held the same pleading expression she'd seen countless times after his outbursts. "You were worried about me?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "After what you did?" James gripped the bars between them. "I was drunk, Ellie. Out of my mind with grief about the baby. You know I'd never hurt you if I was thinking straight." The familiar pattern of excuse and apology washed over Eleanor like a wave of cold water. How many times had she accepted this exact explanation? How many bruises had she hidden while telling herself it was just the drink talking, not her husband? "Where were you going with our wagon and team?" she asked instead of acknowledging his apology. James hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the question. I needed money. Thought we could start fresh somewhere else." "Without me," Eleanor pressed. "I was coming back for you," he insisted, but the lie was evident in his eyes. Nathan shifted beside Eleanor, his presence a solid reassurance at her back. "James," Eleanor said, using his full name deliberately, "I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like gunshots. James's face contorted in disbelief, then anger. "The hell you do," he snarled, the mask of contrition falling away. "You're my wife. You belong with me." "Not anymore," Eleanor replied, surprising herself with her steadiness. "Sheriff Parker, I'd like to press charges against James Nelson for assault." James lunged against the bars. "You ungrateful bitch, after everything I've done for you." Nathan stepped forward protectively, but Eleanor held her ground. "What have you done, James? Given me 3 years of fear. Made me believe I was worthless because I couldn't carry a child." "No court will grant you a divorce," James spat. "And even if they did, where would you go? Who would want damaged goods like you?" The cruelty of his words struck Eleanor like physical blows, but she refused to cower. "I'd rather be alone forever than spend another day with a man who beats his wife for losing a child." "That's enough," Sheriff Parker interrupted, stepping between them. "Mr. Nelson, you're being charged with assault and attempting to sell stolen property. Judge Wilson arrives next week. You'll stay here until then." As the sheriff led Eleanor back outside, James's threats echoed behind them, promises of retribution, claims that no one would believe her over him. On the boardwalk, Eleanor took a shaky breath of fresh air. Nathan watched her carefully, concern evident in his features. "You did well in there," he said quietly. Eleanor looked up at him. "Did I? I've just ensured my husband will hate me forever." "And he's right, divorces are rarely granted, especially out here." "Things are changing," Nathan replied. "And you have witnesses to his abuse now. That counts for something." Eleanor wasn't convinced, but the alternative, returning to James, was unthinkable now that she'd found her voice. "What will happen next?" she asked. "Judge Wilson's circuit includes Coloma. He'll hear the case, determine if there's enough evidence to send James to the territorial prison." Nathan hesitated. "As for the divorce petition, that's separate, but I know a lawyer in Helena who might help." Eleanor nodded, overwhelmed by the uncertain future stretching before her. "I should get back to the Williams house. Martha will be worried." "I'll walk with you," Nathan offered. As they moved slowly down the street, Eleanor became acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople. News traveled fast in small communities like Coloma, and her situation had surely become common knowledge. "People are staring," she murmured. "Let them," Nathan replied. "You've done nothing wrong." His unwavering support gave Eleanor courage. By the time they reached the doctor's house, she had made up her mind about something that had been troubling her. "Deputy Thornton," she said formally, "I can't continue imposing on the Williams hospitality indefinitely. I need to find work." Nathan looked surprised. "Mrs. Nelson, you're still healing. And there's no rush." "There is," she insisted. I need to stand on my own 2 feet. If I'm to start a new life, I need to be able to support myself." After a moment's consideration, Nathan nodded. "I respect that. What kind of work were you thinking?" Eleanor had given this considerable thought during her sleepless nights. "I'm a good cook, and I can sew. Perhaps the hotel or one of the boarding houses needs help." "Let me ask around," Nathan offered. "The Simpson Hotel just lost their kitchen help to marriage last month. Mrs. Simpson mentioned needing a replacement." "Thank you," Eleanor said sincerely, "for everything you've done." Nathan looked momentarily uncomfortable with her gratitude, just doing what any decent person would. But as Eleanor watched him walk away, she knew that wasn't true. Deputy Nathan Thornton had gone far beyond duty in his kindness to her. And despite everything, she found herself drawing strength from his belief in her. The following week brought significant changes to Eleanor's life. Judge Wilfred Wilson arrived on the weekly stagecoach, a formidable figure with a reputation for fairness that preceded him across the Montana Territory. The trial was brief, but intense. Eleanor testified about the pattern of abuse, focusing on the night James had beaten her for losing their baby. Dr. Williams provided medical evidence, while Nathan and Sheriff Parker testified to her condition when they found her and James's subsequent behavior. James, represented by a court-appointed attorney, maintained his innocence, claiming Eleanor's injuries were the result of a fall during an argument. But when questioned about selling the wagon and team, his story faltered. In the end, Judge Wilson found James Nelson guilty of assault and theft of marital property. The sentence was 3 years in the territorial prison at Deer Lodge. As for the matter of divorce, the judge announced, peering over his spectacles at Eleanor, "I've reviewed the petition filed by Mrs. Nelson. Given the evidence of extreme cruelty and abandonment, I'm granting the dissolution of marriage, effective immediately." A murmur rippled through the crowded courtroom. Divorce was uncommon enough to cause a stir, especially when granted to a woman so young. James was led away in handcuffs, his face twisted with hatred as he passed Eleanor. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I'll find you when I get out." Eleanor flinched but held her ground, refusing to show fear in front of the man who had controlled her for so long. Outside the courthouse, Nathan found her sitting alone on a bench, staring at the document that declared her a free woman. "Mrs. Nell," he began, then corrected himself. "Miss Eleanor, congratulations." Eleanor looked up at him, emotions warring inside her. "I should feel relieved, shouldn't I? But mostly I feel lost." Nathan sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "That's natural. You're starting over, but you won't be alone." The simple promise brought unexpected tears to Eleanor's eyes. "The Williams have been so kind, but I can't stay with them forever. And the room at the Simpson Hotel comes with the job, but Mrs. Simpson made it clear it's only for single women. Once I'm well enough to start, I might have another option," Nathan interrupted gently. "My sister Rebecca owns a millinery shop here in town. She has rooms above the store and has been looking for help, said she'd be happy to meet you." Eleanor was taken aback by this unexpected development. "Your sister? You never mentioned a sister." "Becca just returned from Denver last month," Nathan explained. "She was apprenticed to a French milliner there for 2 years. Now she's determined to bring high fashion to Coloma." His affectionate tone when speaking of his sister revealed a softer side of the deputy. "That's very kind, but I don't know anything about making hats," Eleanor admitted. Nathan smiled. "She said your sewing experience would be enough to start with. She can teach you the rest." The prospect of learning a trade, something that was hers alone, was appealing in ways Eleanor hadn't expected. "I'd like to meet her," she decided. Rebecca Thornton proved to be as kind as her brother, though considerably more talkative. At 25, she was a striking woman with the same clear blue eyes as Nathan, though her hair was a lighter brown, almost blonde in the sunlight. The millinery shop occupied a prime location on Coloma's Main Street, its front window displaying elegant hats that seemed transported from another world. The bell above the door jingled as Nathan escorted Eleanor inside. "Becca," he called. "Got someone I'd like you to meet." Rebecca emerged from the back room, pins held between her lips and a half-completed hat in her hands. She quickly set down her work and removed the pins. "You must be Eleanor," she said warmly, approaching with an extended hand. "Nathan's told me all about you." Eleanor cast a questioning glance at the deputy, wondering exactly what he'd shared. "Only good things," Rebecca assured her, interpreting the look correctly. "Come, let me show you the rooms upstairs, if you're interested, that is." The apartment above the shop was small but charming, a sitting room with a fireplace, a compact kitchen, a bedroom with a real feather mattress, and a smaller second bedroom that Rebecca used for storage. "It's too much space for just me," Rebecca explained. "And honestly, I'd welcome the company. Coloma's a friendly town, but evenings get lonely." Eleanor ran her hand along the smooth wood of the kitchen table, trying to imagine herself living in such a pleasant space after years of drafty cabins and temporary accommodations. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "This is so generous." "Say yes," Rebecca urged. "Nathan tells me you're handy with a needle. I'm swamped with orders since I got back. Seems every woman in the county heard about my training in Denver. I need help, and you need a fresh start. It's perfect." Put that way, the arrangement did seem mutually beneficial. "What about rent?" Eleanor asked practically. "Room and board included with employment," Rebecca said promptly. "Plus a percentage of sales once you're trained properly." Eleanor looked to Nathan, who had remained quietly in the background during their tour. "What do you think, Deputy?" "I think my sister drives a hard bargain," he said with a small smile. "But she's also the most honest person I know. If she says she needs help, she does." Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood on the edge of a cliff. "Then I accept, Miss Thornton. Thank you." Rebecca clapped her hands in delight. "Wonderful, and please call me Rebecca. We'll be living together after all." Later, as Nathan walked Eleanor back to the Williams house to collect her few belongings, he seemed relieved. "Becca's a good person," he said, "and determined. She'll make sure you learn the trade properly." "You've done so much for me," Eleanor said, stopping to face him directly. "I don't know how to thank you." Nathan looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You don't owe me thanks, or anything else." His emphasis on the last words made Eleanor realize he was concerned about her feeling indebted to him. The consideration touched her deeply. "Even so," she persisted, "you've changed my life, Deputy Thornton. I won't forget that." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes. "Nathan," he said quietly, "if we're going to be neighbors of sorts, you might as well use my name." Eleanor smiled, the first genuine smile she could remember in months. "Nathan, then." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Eleanor settled into her new life. Her body healed steadily, the bruises fading to yellow, then disappearing entirely. The pain in her ribs subsided to an occasional twinge. Physically, she was recovering well. Emotionally, the journey was more complex. Nightmares still plagued her sleep, vivid recreations of James's attack, or devastating dreams about the babies she'd lost. On those nights, Eleanor would sit by the window of her new room, watching the quiet streets of Coloma until dawn brought relief. During the day, however, she found unexpected joy in learning the millinery trade. Rebecca was a patient teacher, starting Eleanor on simple tasks like sewing ribbons and linings before introducing more complex skills. "You have a natural eye for color," Rebecca commented one afternoon as they worked side by side. "That combination of blue velvet with the silver trim, it's inspired." Eleanor blushed at the praise. "My mother taught me to sew when I was young. She always said fabric should speak to you." "Well, it's certainly talking to you," Rebecca replied, examining Eleanor's handiwork. "Mrs. Chambers will be thrilled with this hat. She's been trying to catch Judge Wilson's eye since he extended his stay in town." The easy camaraderie with Rebecca was healing in its own way. After years of James's increasing isolation, having a female friend who shared meals, work, and conversation was a luxury Eleanor hadn't known she needed. Nathan visited the shop regularly, ostensibly to check on his sister, but his gaze often lingered on Eleanor. He was careful to maintain a professional distance, addressing her as Miss Eleanor in public and keeping their interactions brief but friendly. Townspeople gradually adjusted to Eleanor's new status. Some, particularly older women who believed marriage was forever regardless of circumstances, kept their distance, but most were kind if curious. "How are you settling in?" Martha Williams asked one Sunday after church services. "Rebecca seems pleased with your work." "Very well," Eleanor replied honestly. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." Martha nodded approvingly. "You've shown remarkable strength, dear. Not many women would have the courage to start over as you have." Eleanor wasn't sure she deserved such praise. "I didn't have much choice," she admitted. "There's always a choice," Martha countered. "Many would have returned to an abusive situation rather than face the unknown. You chose a harder path, but the right one." As spring blossomed into summer, Eleanor found herself smiling more, laughing occasionally, and even looking forward to each new day. The millinery shop thrived, with Rebecca teaching Eleanor increasingly advanced techniques. "I'm thinking of ordering some of that new straw from Italy," Rebecca announced one warm June evening as they sat on the small balcony behind their apartment, watching the sunset. "It's expensive, but Mrs. Harrington from Helena commissioned 6 hats for her daughter's coming-out party. We could justify the expense." Eleanor nodded, making notes in the leather-bound ledger she now maintained for the shop. Her facility with numbers had proven an unexpected asset to the business. "If we increase prices on the trimmed hats by just 50 cents, we could afford both the Italian straw and that shipment of French ribbons you've been eyeing," she suggested. Rebecca laughed. "I've created a monster. You're becoming quite the businesswoman, Eleanor Nelson." The use of her married name, still legally hers despite the divorce, brought a shadow across Eleanor's face. "I've been thinking about that," she said slowly. "About my name." Rebecca set down her teacup, giving Eleanor her full attention. "What about it?" "I don't want to be a Nelson anymore," Eleanor admitted. "It ties me to James, to memories I'd rather leave behind." "You could return to your maiden name," Rebecca suggested. "What was it, Nichols? Eleanor Nichols." She tested the sound of it, familiar yet distant, like a half-remembered melody. "My father was so proud of our family name, said the Nichols had been in America since before the Revolution." "Eleanor Nichols," Rebecca repeated. "It suits you, strong, dignified." The next day, Eleanor filed paperwork with the county clerk to legally reclaim her maiden name. It was a small act of independence, but it felt significant, another step toward claiming her own identity. Nathan found her leaving the clerk's office, her expression thoughtful. "Miss Eleanor," he greeted her, tipping his hat. "Everything all right?" "Yes," she replied, holding up the document. "Just making some changes." He glanced at the paper, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Nichols, your family name," Eleanor nodded. It seemed time to reclaim it. "Eleanor Nichols," he said, as if testing how it sounded. "It has a fine ring to it." They walked together toward the millinery shop, maintaining a respectable distance as they always did in public. Though Eleanor had been in Coloma for months now, she was acutely aware that as a divorced woman, her reputation required careful protection. "How's your sister?" Nathan asked. "Haven't seen much of her this week. Working on a special order for Mrs. Harrington in Helena," Eleanor explained. "She barely comes out of the workroom except to eat." Nathan chuckled. "That sounds like Becca. When she gets an idea in her head, nothing distracts her." "It's admirable," Eleanor said. "Her dedication to her craft." They paused outside the shop, awkwardly hovering on the edge of farewell. These moments had become familiar, both seemingly reluctant to end their conversations, yet careful to maintain propriety. "Miss Eleanor," Nathan began, then hesitated. "I was wondering if you might, that is, would you consider—" Eleanor waited, heart inexplicably racing. "Yes. The town's planning a 4th of July celebration," he finally managed. "Picnic at the creek, dancing in the evening. I thought perhaps—" "If you weren't otherwise engaged." The formal invitation brought a warm flush to Eleanor's cheeks. "Are you asking to escort me, Deputy Thornton?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I believe I am, Miss Nichols. If that wouldn't be unwelcome—" "It wouldn't," she replied softly. "Be unwelcome, that is." Nathan's smile broadened, transforming his usually serious face. "Good, that's good." After he'd gone, Eleanor stood on the boardwalk a moment longer, her hand pressed against her chest where a flutter of something long-forgotten hope, perhaps, or simple joy had taken residence. Rebecca was beside herself with excitement when Eleanor shared news of Nathan's invitation. "Finally!" she exclaimed, setting aside the half-completed bonnet she was working on. "I was beginning to think you two would circle each other forever. Do you know how many eligible women in this town have set their caps for my brother?" Eleanor hadn't considered this and felt a twist of uncertainty. "Perhaps he's just being kind. He feels responsible for me in a way," Rebecca scoffed. "Nathan's kind to everyone, but he doesn't look at everyone the way he looks at you." "And how is that?" Eleanor asked despite herself. "Like a man seeing sunshine after a long winter," Rebecca replied simply. The 4th of July dawned clear and bright, promising perfect weather for the town celebration. Eleanor stood before the small mirror in her bedroom, critically examining her appearance. The dress was new, a gift from Rebecca, who had insisted that Eleanor needed something special for the occasion. Made of lightweight cotton in a soft blue that matched her eyes, with delicate white embroidery at the collar and cuffs, it was the prettiest thing Eleanor had owned in years. "You look beautiful," Rebecca said from the doorway. "Simple, elegant, exactly right for a town picnic." Eleanor smoothed her hands over the skirt. "Are you sure it's not too much? I don't want people to think I'm improper." Rebecca sighed, crossing the room to adjust the collar of Eleanor's dress. "Eleanor Nichols, you are a respectable businesswoman and a credit to this community. Anyone who thinks otherwise can go jump in the creek." The fierce loyalty in Rebecca's voice brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "None of that now," Rebecca scolded gently, dabbing at Eleanor's eyes with a handkerchief. "You'll ruin your complexion before Nathan even arrives." As if summoned by his name, a knock sounded at the shop door below. "Perfect timing," Rebecca declared. "Now remember, have fun. You deserve it." Nathan waited at the bottom of the stairs, hat in hand, dressed in his Sunday best. When Eleanor descended, he stared at her with such open admiration that she felt her cheeks warm. "Miss Nichols," he said formally, though his eyes conveyed much more. "You look lovely." "Thank you, Deputy," she replied with equal formality, though she couldn't suppress a smile. "You're quite presentable yourself." Rebecca shooed them out the door, claiming she would follow later with Dr. and Mrs. Williams. "Don't wait for me," she insisted. "I've got a few things to finish up here first." The celebration was already underway when Nathan and Eleanor arrived at the creek that ran along the eastern edge of town. Tables laden with food lined the grassy bank, while children played games in the shallow water. A platform had been erected for dancing later, and several men were tuning instruments nearby. Eleanor was acutely aware of the curious glances as Nathan escorted her through the crowd. Though months had passed since her divorce and James's imprisonment, being seen in public with another man, especially one as respected as Deputy Thornton, was certain to cause talk. "Perhaps this wasn't wise," she murmured to Nathan as an older couple pointedly turned away at their approach. "Don't mind the Hendersons," Nathan replied quietly. "They disapprove of most things that happened after 1850. His attempt at humor eased her tension somewhat, but Eleanor remained conscious of her precarious social position. A divorced woman in a frontier town walked a fine line between acceptance and ostracism. Sheriff Parker approached them, nodding cordially. "Deputy, Miss Nichols. Fine day for a celebration." "Indeed it is, Sheriff," Nathan agreed. Miss Nichols was just admiring the dancing platform. "Quite an improvement over last year's arrangements." Sheriff Parker smiled. "My wife insisted. Said she nearly broke an ankle last year when her heel caught between the boards." He turned to Eleanor. "Speaking of my wife, she asked me to bring you over. Said something about wanting your opinion on a hat she's commissioned from Miss Thornton." The simple inclusion in normal social interaction meant more to Eleanor than she could express. "I'd be happy to speak with her," she replied. As the day progressed, Eleanor found herself gradually relaxing. Most townspeople were welcoming, or at least politely neutral. A few women who had witnessed James's abuse in the courthouse were particularly kind, introducing Eleanor to their families and including her in their conversations. Nathan remained attentive without being overbearing, bringing her lemonade when the afternoon grew warm and ensuring she was introduced to newcomers as Miss Eleanor Nichols, who works with my sister at the millinery shop, a description that established her respectability through both occupation and connection. When the dancing began after sunset, lanterns illuminating the platform with golden light, Nathan hesitated before offering his hand. "Would you care to dance, Miss Nichols?" he asked formally. "I should warn you that I have 2 left feet, according to my sister." Eleanor placed her hand in his, ignoring the flutter in her stomach at the contact. "I haven't danced in years," she admitted. "We can stumble together." In truth, Nathan was a better dancer than he'd claimed, leading her confidently through a simple waltz. His hand at her waist was respectfully positioned, but Eleanor was intensely aware of his touch, the warmth of his palm through the fabric of her dress, the gentle pressure of his fingers guiding her movements. "You're doing just fine," she told him as they circled the platform. "Having the right partner helps," he replied, his voice lower than usual. Their eyes met, and for a moment the music, the crowd, the entire celebration seemed to fade away. Eleanor saw something in Nathan's gaze that made her breath catch a warmth, an admiration, perhaps even a longing that mirrored her own confused feelings. The spell broke when the music ended, and applause erupted around them. Nathan released her waist but kept hold of her hand as he led her from the platform. "Would you like to walk for a bit?" he asked. "It's getting rather warm with all these people." Eleanor nodded, grateful for the suggestion. The night air was cool against her flushed cheeks as they moved away from the crowd, following a path that ran alongside the creek. Other couples had had the same idea, dispersed at discrete intervals along the water's edge, seeking moments of privacy within the bounds of propriety. They stopped beneath a large cottonwood tree, its leaves rustling gently in the evening breeze. The sounds of the celebration were muted here, the laughter and music softened by distance. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Nathan asked, still holding her hand. "Very much," Eleanor replied honestly. "It's been a lovely day." Nathan seemed to be struggling with something, his expression shifting from determination to uncertainty and back again. Finally, he took a deep breath. "Miss Nichols Eleanor," he began, using her given name for the first time. "I hope I'm not being presumptuous, but there's something I've wanted to tell you for some time now." Eleanor's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes, when I found you that night, I recognized something in your eyes, a pain I knew too well." Nathan's gaze dropped to their joined hands. "My mother suffered similarly. My father was not a kind man when he drank, which was often." The confession stunned Eleanor. "Nathan, I'm so sorry," he shook his head. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy, but to explain why. Why your situation affected me so deeply. When I told you it wasn't your fault losing the baby, your husband's cruelty, I meant it with everything in me. Because I'd seen my mother blame herself for years for things that were never her responsibility. Understanding dawned. That's why you helped me. Because of your mother." "At first, yes," Nathan admitted, "but then—" He met her eyes again, his expression open, vulnerable. "Then I came to admire your courage, your determination to rebuild your life, your kindness despite everything you've endured." Eleanor hardly dared breathe, afraid to break the moment. "What I'm trying to say," Nathan continued, "is that my feelings for you have grown far beyond professional concern or even friendship. But I understand if that's not something you're ready to hear." The honesty of his declaration moved Eleanor deeply. After years of manipulation and lies from James, Nathan's straightforward admission of his feelings was like fresh air after long confinement. "I don't know what I'm ready for," she admitted softly. "These past months have been about learning to stand on my own, finding out who Eleanor Nichols really is." Nathan nodded, a flicker of disappointment crossing his features despite his obvious effort to hide it. "I understand. I wouldn't want to interfere with that journey. But," Eleanor continued, gathering her courage, "I do know that being with you makes me happy. That when you walk into the shop the day seems brighter. That when you held me and told me it wasn't my fault, something inside me began to heal." Hope kindled in Nathan's eyes. "Does that mean—" "It means I'd like to see where this might lead," Eleanor said carefully. "Slowly, with no promises yet beyond honesty between us." The smile that spread across Nathan's face was like sunrise. "I can accept those terms, Miss Nichols." In a gesture that seemed both cautious and inevitable, Nathan raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The simple contact sent warmth spreading through Eleanor's body. "We should return," she murmured, reluctantly aware of propriety. "People will talk." "Let them," Nathan replied, though he turned obediently toward the path back. "I'm not ashamed of my feelings for you, Eleanor." As they walked back toward the celebration, still hand in hand, Eleanor realized she wasn't ashamed either. For the first time in years, she felt as though she was walking toward something, rather than away from the past. The weeks following the 4th of July celebration brought subtle but significant changes to Eleanor's life. She and Nathan established a careful courtship, mindful of her status as a divorced woman and his position as a deputy. They took Sunday afternoon walks when the weather permitted, sometimes accompanied by Rebecca, other times under the distant but approving supervision of Mrs. Williams or Sheriff Parker's wife. Nathan called at the millinery shop regularly, often bringing small tokens, wildflowers, a book of poetry, once a particularly fine piece of chocolate from a traveling salesman. "You're positively glowing these days," Rebecca observed one August morning as they unpacked a shipment of feathers. "It suits you." Eleanor smiled, running her fingers over an ostrich plume. "I never expected to feel this way again, or perhaps ever." My brother is equally transformed, Rebecca replied. Sheriff Parker says he's whistling while doing paperwork. The thought of stern, serious Nathan whistling at his desk made Eleanor laugh, a free, uninhibited sound that still sometimes surprised her. Laughter had been scarce in her marriage to James, especially in the later years. But beyond the joy of new romance, Eleanor found deeper satisfaction in her growing independence. The skills Rebecca taught her had become second nature, and customers now specifically requested Miss Nichols' touch on their hat trimmings. Her salary had increased accordingly, allowing her to open a small account at the Coloma Bank. A woman should have her own money, Rebecca had insisted when Eleanor hesitated. Not that I expect you to need it with Nathan making those calf eyes at you, but still, independence matters. On a warm September evening, Nathan invited Eleanor to dinner at the Grand Hotel, the finest establishment in Coloma, reserved for special occasions. Are you sure? Eleanor asked when he extended the invitation. It's rather expensive, and people will certainly talk. Let them talk, Nathan replied with the easy confidence that had first drawn her to him. I have something important to discuss with you. Eleanor wore her best dress for the occasion, a deep green wool that Rebecca had helped her remake from an outdated gown purchased secondhand. With fresh trim and a new collar, it looked almost fashionable. The maitre d' at the Grand Hotel greeted them with formal courtesy, showing them to a table near the window. Eleanor was conscious of curious glances from other diners, but found, to her surprise, that they bothered her less than they once would have. After they ordered, Nathan reached across the table to take her hand, his expression serious. Eleanor, he began, there's something I need to tell you. Her heart stuttered. In her experience, conversations that began this way rarely ended well. Yes, I've been offered a position. Sheriff of Silver Creek. Relief flooded Eleanor, followed quickly by confusion. Silver Creek, that's nearly 100 miles from here. Nathan nodded, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. It's a good opportunity. The town's growing fast with the new silver strikes. They need experienced law enforcement. That's wonderful, Eleanor said, trying to mask her disappointment. The thought of Nathan leaving Coloma, leaving her, created an ache in her chest she hadn't anticipated. When would you start? That depends, he replied, his gaze steady. On your answer to my next question. Before Eleanor could respond, Nathan slipped from his chair and knelt beside her table. A hush fell over the restaurant as diners realized what was happening. Eleanor Nichols, Nathan said, his voice clear and unwavering, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You are the strongest, kindest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? The proposal, though not entirely unexpected given the seriousness of their courtship, still left Eleanor momentarily speechless. Around them, diners waited with bated breath for her response. Nathan, she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, are you certain? I'm divorced, older than I appear, and may never be able to give you children. The fear that had haunted her since losing her third child with James surfaced now, unavoidable. I'm certain, Nathan replied without hesitation. I love you, Eleanor, children or no children, past or no past. I love you and I want to build a life with you. The simple declaration, I love you, words James had stopped saying years before the end of their marriage, broke through Eleanor's last defenses. Tears welled in her eyes, but for once, they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. Yes, she said, her voice strengthening. Yes, Nathan Thornton, I will marry you. Applause erupted around them as Nathan rose to his feet and, propriety be damned, pulled Eleanor into a swift, sweet kiss, their first. The engagement of Deputy Thornton and the divorced Mrs. Nelson, now Miss Nichols, provided Coloma with gossip for weeks. Some disapproved, particularly those who held rigid views about divorce. But the circumstances of Eleanor's first marriage and James's imprisonment were well known, and most townspeople chose to support the couple. Rebecca was ecstatic, immediately offering to make Eleanor's wedding dress. Nothing too elaborate, she insisted when Eleanor protested the expense. But every bride deserves something special. Martha Williams appointed herself unofficial wedding planner, offering the doctor's garden for the ceremony. "It will be perfect in October," she declared. The leaves turning, the last of the roses still in bloom. Eleanor accepted their enthusiasm with a mixture of gratitude and trepidation. Her first wedding had been a hasty affair at 17, driven more by her parents' recent deaths and her need for security than by genuine love. This time everything was different. She was different. "Are you sure about Silver Creek?" she asked Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch behind the millinery shop, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "You've built a good reputation here in Coloma." "I'm sure," he replied, his arm comfortable around her shoulders. "Silver Creek needs a sheriff who understands frontier law but isn't in the mining company's pockets. And," he hesitated, "I thought the fresh start might be good for both of us. No history, no whispers." The thoughtfulness of his consideration touched Eleanor deeply. "What about Rebecca? The shop is doing so well." "Becca's already planning to open a second location," Nathan revealed with a chuckle. "Says Silver Creek ladies will need proper hats as the town grows. She'll stay here to run the Coloma shop but visit often." As summer faded into fall, wedding preparations accelerated. Eleanor found herself swept along in the excitement, sometimes hardly believing this was her life engaged to a good man, respected in her community, looking forward rather than backward. There was only one shadow on her happiness: the knowledge that James would eventually be released from prison. His 3-year sentence would end in 1879, less than 2 years away. "He won't come after you," Nathan assured her when she finally voiced her fear. "Men like that are cowards at heart. Besides, by then you'll be Mrs. Thornton, living 100 miles away." Eleanor wanted to believe him, but James's parting threat echoed in her memory. "This isn't over. I'll find you when I get out." 2 weeks before the wedding, disaster struck. A telegram arrived from the territorial prison at Deer Lodge. James Nelson had escaped during a prison transfer, along with 2 other inmates. His whereabouts were unknown. Nathan immediately increased patrols around town, particularly near the millinery shop. "He won't come here," he insisted, though the tightness around his eyes betrayed his concern. It would be the first place the authorities would look. But Eleanor knew James, his stubbornness, his capacity for holding grudges. "He blamed me for everything," she told Nathan. "For the lost babies, for his arrest, for the disgrace. He won't just disappear." The wedding plans continued, but a pall had fallen over what should have been a joyous time. Rebecca insisted Eleanor sleep in her room rather than alone. Nathan arranged for a deputy to be posted near the shop at night. Everyone watched for strangers in town. 3 days before the wedding, Eleanor and Rebecca were working late, finishing the last details on Eleanor's wedding dress. The shop below was dark, closed hours earlier as dusk settled over Coloma. "Try it on one more time," Rebecca urged, holding up the completed gown. "I want to make sure the hem is perfect." Eleanor slipped the dress over her head, the soft ivory satin cool against her skin. Rebecca had outdone herself. The gown was simple but elegant, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, tiny pearl buttons down the back. "It's beautiful," Eleanor breathed, turning slowly before the mirror. "I never imagined I'd wear something so fine." "You deserve it," Rebecca said firmly, kneeling to check the hem. "Every happiness, every beautiful thing." A noise from downstairs froze both women, the distinct sound of the shop door opening then closing quietly. "Nathan." Rebecca called. Though they knew it couldn't be him, he was on patrol on the other side of town. No answer came, but footsteps could be heard on the stairs, heavy, deliberate. "The back door," Rebecca whispered urgently, pulling Eleanor toward the rear of the apartment. But before they could reach it, the door to the apartment burst open. James Nelson stood in the doorway, gaunt and wild-eyed, a revolver in his hand. "Hello, Ellie," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Aren't you a picture in white?" Eleanor instinctively pushed Rebecca behind her, facing the husband she had hoped never to see again. "James," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "You shouldn't be here, they're looking for you." James laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Counting on it, but I had business to finish first." His gaze moved to the wedding dress, his expression darkening. "Moving up in the world, aren't you? Deputy's woman now. Always knew you were a whore at heart." Rebecca made a small sound of outrage, but Eleanor silenced her with a warning squeeze of her hand. "James, please. Whatever you came to do, it won't change anything. The divorce is final. I'm marrying Nathan in 3 days." "Not if you're dead," James replied, raising the revolver. "Figure I'll kill you both, then wait for the deputy to come running. Take him down too. They'll hang me anyway for escaping, might as well make it worth my while." Eleanor's mind raced, searching for a way to protect Rebecca, to delay James until help might arrive. The irony of facing death in her wedding dress wasn't lost on her. "Why?" she asked, genuinely curious despite her fear. "Why couldn't you just start a new life somewhere else? Why come back for revenge?" Something flickered in James's eyes, a moment of humanity in the monster he'd become. "You were mine," he said simply. "Everything I had. Then you turned the law against me, made me look like a monster in front of the whole town." "You beat me until I couldn't stand," Eleanor replied, anger replacing fear. "For losing a baby I wanted as much as you did. You made yourself a monster, James. I just finally admitted the truth." Her words seemed to enrage him. James stepped closer, the gun now pointed directly at Eleanor's heart. "Shut your mouth," he snarled. "You always thought you were better than me, always with your fancy words and your disappointed looks." Eleanor's hand found Rebecca's behind her back, squeezing once in silent communication. If they could separate, create confusion, one of them might reach the door. "I never thought I was better than you, James," she said, taking a small step to the right, drawing his attention. "I loved you once. Wanted a family with you, but you destroyed that love with your fists and your cruelty." As she'd hoped, James followed her movement, the gun tracking her rather than Rebecca. "Love," he spat. "You don't know the meaning. If you loved me, you'd have given me sons instead of losing them." The old accusation, once so devastating, now seemed merely pathetic. Eleanor took another step, noting Rebecca's careful movement in her peripheral vision. "No woman chooses to lose a child, James. It broke my heart each time, but you couldn't see past your own grief to mine." James's hand trembled slightly, the first sign of weakness in his bravado. "You turned the whole town against me, made me into a monster. No, James." Eleanor's voice grew stronger, months of healing and self-discovery lending her courage she'd never possessed in their marriage. "You did that yourself. The man I married would never have raised his hand to his wife, would never have blamed her for a tragedy beyond her control." For a moment, confusion crossed James's face, perhaps recognition of the truth in her words. Then his expression hardened again. "Enough talking. Say your prayers, Ellie." Time seemed to slow. Eleanor saw James's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Rebecca lunge for the door in a desperate bid for help, heard the thunderous report of the gun, but the bullet never struck her. In the instant before James fired, the apartment door crashed open, and Nathan Thornton hurled himself at James. The shot went wild, splintering the ceiling as both men crashed to the floor. The struggle was brief but violent. James fought with the desperation of a man with nothing to lose, but Nathan had training and righteous fury on his side. Within moments, he had disarmed James and pinned him face down, one knee in the escaped convict's back. "Rebecca," Nathan gasped, "get the sheriff. Now." As Rebecca fled for help, Nathan looked up at Eleanor, still standing frozen in her wedding dress. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice raw with fear. Eleanor shook her head, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. Beneath him, James continued to struggle, cursing viciously. "Should have killed her when I had the chance," he snarled. "Worthless bitch couldn't even give me a living child." Something in Nathan's expression shifted at those words. His control, maintained throughout the fight, slipped momentarily. He grabbed James by the hair, forcing his face up. "Say that again," he growled. "I dare you." For once, James seemed to recognize true danger. He fell silent, eyes darting between Nathan and Eleanor. "Nathan," Eleanor said softly, finding her voice. "Don't, he's not worth it." The simple statement seemed to restore Nathan's composure. He released James's hair, though his grip remained firm. "You're right," he agreed. "He's not." Minutes later, Sheriff Parker arrived with 2 deputies. James Nelson was secured in handcuffs and marched from the shop, shouting threats and obscenities until one of the deputies gagged him with a bandana. "He won't bother you again," Sheriff Parker promised Eleanor. Escaped convicts who add attempted murder to their record don't get second chances in this territory. After the lawmen departed with their prisoner, Nathan gathered Eleanor into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "When I heard he'd escaped," he whispered, "I've never been so afraid." Then passing by, seeing the light in the shop window when I knew you'd closed hours ago. Eleanor clung to him, her wedding dress crushed between them, the reality of their narrow escape sinking in. "You saved my life," she murmured against his chest. "Again." Nathan pulled back slightly, examining her face with concern. "Are you truly unharmed when I think what could have happened?" "I'm fine," Eleanor assured him, though her hands still trembled. "Just overwhelmed." Rebecca returned from seeing the sheriff off, her face pale but composed. "Well," she said with forced lightness, "I think we all need a drink." And she added, eyeing Eleanor's crumpled wedding dress, "I'll need to press that gown again before Saturday." The matter-of-fact statement, so practical in the face of their ordeal, broke the tension. Eleanor found herself laughing, the sound edged with hysteria but genuine nonetheless. Nathan joined her, his arms still tight around her waist, as if afraid she might disappear. "I don't want to wait until Saturday," he said suddenly when their laughter subsided. "Marry me tomorrow, Eleanor. After tonight, I don't want to waste another day." Eleanor's heart swelled with love for this man who had saved her in so many ways. "Yes," she agreed without hesitation. "Tomorrow." They were married the next afternoon in Dr. Williams' garden, with only Rebecca, the doctor and his wife, and Sheriff Parker as witnesses. Eleanor wore her ivory satin dress, hastily pressed and repaired where James's rough handling had torn the delicate fabric. Nathan wore his Sunday suit, his deputy's badge polished to a shine on his lapel. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When Judge Wilson pronounced them man and wife, Nathan cupped Eleanor's face in his hands as if she were made of porcelain. "I promise," he whispered before kissing her, "that you will never know fear in our home. That you will always be cherished, respected, loved." Eleanor believed him with every fiber of her being. 2 days later, they departed for Silver Creek, leaving behind the mixed memories of Coloma. Rebecca promised to visit once they were settled, bringing news and perhaps opening her second millinery shop if the mining town proved prosperous enough. Silver Creek welcomed its new sheriff and his bride with curiosity and cautious respect. The town was indeed growing rapidly, rough at the edges but with a core of decent folk establishing businesses, schools, and churches. Nathan proved as capable a sheriff as he had been a deputy, firm but fair in his dealings with the sometimes rowdy miners and gamblers. Eleanor found her own place in the community, first helping Rebecca establish her satellite shop, then teaching sewing at the newly built schoolhouse. Their home, a tidy cabin on the edge of town, became known for its welcoming atmosphere. Nathan insisted on building a proper stone fireplace to keep you warm during the Montana winters, he told Eleanor, though they both knew the gesture meant far more. It was before that fireplace, on a snowy evening in early 1878, that Eleanor shared news that once would have terrified her. "Nathan," she said, setting aside her sewing, "I'm with child." His reaction was everything James's had never been, joy mixed with concern, questions about her comfort rather than demands about the child's sex. When the doctor confirmed the pregnancy, Nathan treated Eleanor with such careful tenderness that she finally had to laugh. "I won't break," she assured him. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my wife," he replied seriously. "Not carrying my child." "Let me worry a little." The worry proved unnecessary. On a cool September morning in 1878, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy son. Nathan wept when the midwife placed the squalling infant in his arms. "He's perfect," he whispered, perching carefully on the edge of their bed so Eleanor could see their child's face. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and lungs like a bellows. "What shall we call him?" Eleanor asked, exhausted but radiant with joy. Nathan considered the tiny face, already showing signs of his mother's delicate features. "How about Thomas?" he suggested. "After my grandfather, he was a good man, kind and steady." "Thomas Thornton," Eleanor tested the name. "It has a fine sound." 2 years later, a daughter joined the family, Rebecca Martha Thornton, named for the 2 women who had helped Eleanor rebuild her life. Unlike her brother's easy birth, Rebecca's arrival was difficult, with complications that left the doctor shaking his head gravely. "There won't be more children," he told them when Eleanor had recovered enough to hear the news. "The risk would be too great." Nathan took the news with characteristic grace. "2 healthy children and a wife I adore," he said, kissing Eleanor's forehead. "I'm the richest man in Montana Territory." As the children grew, Silver Creek prospered, evolving from a rough mining town to a respectable community with a proper courthouse, a bank, and even a small theater. Nathan rose from sheriff to county judge, his fairness and integrity earning him widespread respect. Eleanor never forgot the dark days of her first marriage, but the memories faded, replaced by the joy of watching her children thrive and her husband's unwavering love. Sometimes, holding little Rebecca on her lap while Thomas played at her feet, she would remember Nathan's words on that terrible night so long ago. "It wasn't your fault." Those words had given her permission to forgive herself, to believe in second chances, to trust that happiness was possible even after great pain. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Eleanor with a gift, a delicate gold locket containing miniature portraits of Thomas and Rebecca. "To remind you," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "that dreams can come true even when they seem impossible." Eleanor touched the locket, then reached up to trace the lines that time had etched around her husband's still handsome face. "I never dreamed of this," she admitted. "After everything with James, I couldn't imagine being truly happy again." Nathan drew her into his arms, as strong and steady as the day he'd first held her. "That's the best kind of dream," he murmured against her hair, now streaked with elegant silver. "The one you didn't know to wish for." As they stood together in the home they had built, surrounded by evidence of their shared life, children's drawings, books well read, furniture worn smooth by loving use, Eleanor knew he was right. From the darkest moment of her life had come a light brighter than she could have imagined. It wasn't the path she had expected, but it was, without question, the journey she was meant to travel.